Welcome you all to the Rotary Club of Sydney. At the outset, I'd like to begin by acknowledging and paying my respects to the traditional custodians of the land on which we are gathered here today. I am on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. The Rotary Club of Sydney supports the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Welcome to our 6th and 2021 last edition of the Rotary Youth Talks. Our leading question is, how do we cultivate youth leadership for a kinder and a better world? And our motto has been derived from Mahatma Gandhi's famous quote that says, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Rotary Youth Talks are targeted at youth and those working in this space, a place where they share their experiences and insights on youth participation, capacity building, and broader engagement. But many times people may misconstrue this that it's only the youth speakers. Not really. Rotary Youth Talks is actually to foster engagement across the spectrum, and they are adults, they are young people, they're old people working in that space, and everybody is welcome. Today, we'll hear and be inspired from our guest speaker, Rabbi Zalman Kastel AM, who will share his thoughts on youth partnership for humanity. On that note, I want to reinforce that this is a safe space where all ideas are welcome. So please feel free to participate and share your views through the question and answer chat function on Zoom. We'll also have an opportunity to have a panel discussion later this evening where we'll be joined by Ms. Calisha Bennett and Tanja Hagedorn, and hopefully Mr. Aamon is joining us. So welcome guests and welcome all of you. A very special welcome from Rotary Club of Sydney. So allow me to also extend a special welcome to our guests, especially our past District Governor, Di North, and our past President, Ms. Fatima Ali. Welcome, Fatima, and welcome, Di. And a special welcome to our President-elect, Mr. David Hurst, who is also joining us today. Now, I would like to invite fellow Rotarian and Chairman of the Rotary for Humanity Foundation, Chris McDivitt, to introduce our guest speaker. Following the talk, we'll also have a roundtable discussion. So stay tuned and please keep your buckles up, and welcome everyone. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Sonu. It's slightly confused in the title there. Yes, I am a member of the Rotary Club of Sydney, and yes, I am the chairman of Together for Humanity, and that's not a conflict because I actually met Rabbi Zalman through the Rotary Club of Sydney Peace Building Group when we gave Together for Humanity the honour of our Community Peace Prize some years ago. David, how many years ago was it? 4 years ago? 5 years ago? Anyway, it doesn't really matter.
It's my first year, a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. And from that, I was inspired by Rabbi Zalman, and I'm now the chair of Together for Humanity. In fact, both Zalman and I have just raced home to come onto this Zoom from our final board meeting for the year. So it's wonderful having Calisha and Tanja and Aamon with us because this is a group where we should have a very good discussion. So just a little bit of background for those of you that don't know Zalman as well as I do. You will hear he's got a slight New York accent, and we forgive him for that because he was brought up in a very racially divided part of New York called Brooklyn. Many of you will know that. And it was his encounters with Christians and Muslims that transformed him and led to him founding Together for Humanity. First of all here in Sydney, but now we're extending across Australia. Tanya's from Queensland, Aamon's now in Victoria. Our mission is to foster interfaith and intercultural understanding in Australian schools. And in doing so, help young people have a sense of belonging and where they fit in this world. In recognition of his work, as you can see by his little badge, Zalman was awarded a Member of Australia. And as I said, Together for Humanity has won the Rotary Club of Sydney Community Peace Prize. And I believe, Zalman, you're going to lead the discussion and then invite some of your colleagues to join in. Are you happy for people to sort of, as it's such a small group, sort of butt in and interrupt as we go?
Certainly, I'm happy for that to happen. If it's not against the rules, do feel free to interrupt and ask clarifications or make comments, and also feel free to use the chat function as well. So either way, I'm happy either way. And obviously, the more interaction, the more useful it's going to be. So I'm pretty open.
Over to you.
All right. Thank you for the introduction, Chris. Good afternoon, everybody, and good to see reconnect with lots of people in the group that I've crossed paths with over the years. I want to acknowledge, again, my colleagues from Together for Humanity. Calisha, Bennett is our informal education officer. Tanja, Hagedorn is our education and Queensland coordinator, and Aamon is our community engagement officer in Victoria.
And I'm going to interrupt because we should acknowledge that Tanja is actually a former Rotary Peace Scholarship.
Yeah, Tanja, I'm not sure exactly what, I know Tanya's got a connection with Rotary. I'm just not sure exactly what the nature of the connection is. Maybe Tanja can tell us.
Yeah, well, it was through a Rotary Peace Fellow organized event here at UQ that I first heard about Together for Humanity, and that was because Medina was presenting here. And I was just intrigued because it ticked many of my boxes, and that was a few months later that I was approached to be part of it, which was really a very interesting and cool coincidence.
Mm. Yeah, thank you, Tanja. So this team and lots of other people that are involved in New South Wales, Queensland, and South Australia do a range of different activities to engage young people to embrace difference. Some of those are small group sessions. Tanya's just done 6 days at a Queensland high school. Sometimes they can be inter-school, cross-cultural days, students from different cultures meeting and learning about each other. We've done one of those with Ravenswood a number of years ago. And explore experiences of being an outsider, prejudice, culture, values, belonging. And a key part of this is, as Chris mentioned earlier, is having that contact, learning and meeting the other, and expanding our horizons in that way. Now, these programs have been independently evaluated by a team of academics from Western Sydney University. And what they found was that Together for Humanity programs are effective in assisting students to challenge stereotypes, alleviate their fears of the other, to deal appropriately with prejudice and discrimination, and promote acquisition of empathy, mutual acceptance, and belonging. I want to tell you a little story that I told to some children in Lismore. This is a story from one of our team, from one of my colleagues, Donna Jacob-Seif. Long ago, when the world was new, and everything was fresh and there was no pollution and the rivers ran clear. The world was just such a happy place. The sun was shining and all the animals decided to have a party. And it was very exciting, all the animals getting together. And the bat saw this party and decided to join along. Saw them dancing and all of the celebration. But when the bat got to the party, there was a zebra. And the zebra said, "What are you doing here?" And the bat said, "I came to join your party." And the bat said, "Stop there. You don't belong in this party. You're a bird. You've got wings. You're not one of us. Away you go. You're not welcome here." So the bat was very upset, and the bat went to a tree and stood at the branch and looked over the party and saw everyone celebrating and felt really sad. And tears started to stream down its eyes, and eventually the branch became wet, and the bat slipped on the tears and hung upside down, and hung around like that for a while until it heard that there was a bird party. Having been told that it's a bird, the bat, now convinced that it was a bird, went to the bird party. Off it goes, very excited, comes to the bird party. Hang on a second, the vulture says, "What are you doing here?" He says, "I came for the party." Well, hang on a second. "What are you doing? You don't belong in this party. You've got fur, you've got these fangs, you're not one of us." The bat says, "But I've got wings. They told me I was a bird." "Nah, you're not welcome." And so the bat flies back to the tree and cries again, and the branch gets wet again, and the bat slips on the branch and hangs upside down, and still hangs like that today. And this is a story we told to a group of children in Lismore the other day. And we asked the children, what do you think was the state of mind of the bat at that point? How resilient would that bat feel? And of course, the bat wasn't feeling very resilient. Well, what can the bat do in the first instance in such a situation? And the children offered two solutions. One was that the bat can make a party with other bats, and all the bats can hang out together and belong together and have fun. Okay, could work. Certainly better than being alone. Any other ideas? Some other children said, yeah, the bat can actually make a party, but not just have it for bats. The bat can also open the party to any other animals or birds that want to join in. Okay, so those were the two solutions that the children offered. We then went on to talk about what other animals can do and other endings of the story. But I want to focus on that for a moment because legend has it, and I don't know if this is historically correct, that the way that Hollywood started was because there was anti-Semitism on Broadway. And so some of the Jewish people that were skilled in acting and storytelling went to Broadway and had the door slammed in their face. And so they went off to Hollywood and they created their own little place for telling stories. And they had their own little club, which is why you'll find some movies have inside Yiddish jokes, because these were all Eastern European Jews. So if you don't understand any of those movies, you just pop me an email and I'll translate for you. But more importantly, one of the things that happen when communities are hurt is that we circle the wagons, and certainly that was my story. My great-grandparents and ancestors for many generations were like the bat in the story, with doors slamming in our faces, and eventually recognizing that we can only look out for each other and find belonging with each other. And so I was ordained as a Hasidic rabbi in Brooklyn, and had very little connection with anyone outside my own party because we had our own little bat party. I went every day to help all elderly Jews pray. I was active in the community, trying to make things better for others, but only within my own community. I thought of people who were not Jewish as profoundly and essentially different from me. And that all changed in 2001. Joe Sheridan, a Catholic man, rang me out of the blue and made a connection and said he'd like to talk. And we talked about purpose and compassion. And I was so deeply moved by this man's integrity and depth and his beautiful heart and his spirituality, that I thought maybe we need to, as a society, reconnect to that altruism. And so we began something, a goodness and kindness campaign. And in May 2002, with September 11 very much on our minds, a group of Year 6 students at St. Ives North Primary School hosted me, Joe, and a Muslim filmmaker. The teacher actually happened to be a Rotarian, Di Barnes. And for almost 20 years now, we've been doing that work. And here's some of the things that students have told us. One boy was thinking about how people close up and become defensive. And he said, I believe that if there's a real reason to close up, then close up. But I believe that if you close up, don't close up for long. You close up for a little while, try to understand what happened. You think through your options, and then you open up again and try and re-embrace people from different backgrounds. Another student said, I used to be a massive prejudice, but now I've been able to filter out rather than labeling an entire group. Just saying, sure, there's a few bad ones, but I can't judge a whole community based off one guy's actions. So that to me is a massive. It really helped me out. Another student, I'm more open now, more open to everyone. When I see someone, I say hi to them. I don't just put my head down and walk off. I've been more interacting, more understanding. It's given me more insight to everyone around me. It can make peace. It's important that we learn about Muslims and their culture. There's obviously a non-Muslim child, and we make friends. I think it's important to understand that we're all humans and we should try and get along. A highlight of this work actually was in the Northern Territory, and I was sitting with Muhammad, a Liberian Muslim man, a Christian guy from Perth with dreadlocks, and an elder, Auntie Ellen Gekamangu. And we were about to walk into a school to do a 2-day program the second day of the program. And I asked Auntie Ellen how they wanted a leadership program, and I asked Auntie Ellen, how do we do that? How do we make this program more culturally appropriate for Aboriginal students? And she said, well, you have a tree, and the tree's got branches and roots, and then you have pencils. And I'm looking at her and thinking, this is about 10 minutes before the program's about to start. And this information, because obviously we flew in, that we weren't as well organized at the time. And I'm thinking, the tree, the pencils, the branches, what are we doing in 10 minutes from now? And then a penny dropped for me, and I thought, well, hang on a second. I think this is a Zalman, you're not listening moment. She's trying to tell me something. I asked her a question, and clearly I asked her the wrong question. She's telling me something, and I don't understand what she's saying, but the question I asked her clearly didn't get me the answer I needed. And so I asked a very different, much more basic, open question. I said, Auntie Ellen, does it make any sense in your way to tell 11-year-olds they can be leaders? She said, no. I said, well, what we're really driving at is we want these children to have a sense of agency, a sense that they can contribute, that they can make a difference, they can make things better. They can connect, they can belong. How do we do that? She said, oh, that's the kinship system. Leave it to me. And so we decided we're not going to have a leadership day after all. And Auntie Ellen sat down and talked to the kids. And Auntie Ellen, bless her, she's a special woman, but I wouldn't say she's a charismatic speaker. And she spoke in a monotone. And she told the children how in Arnhem Land, everything is someone's responsibility. Every plant, every duck, every living thing is someone's responsibility. And we have responsibilities to each other. And the children just came alive. She talked to them about that, Western people might talk about respect. And for her people, they might talk about shame. And shame is just another word for respect and humility, she explained to the kids. And then when Aboriginal people in that place talk about shame, what they might be, if I remember correctly, what she was saying is it's a way of not being above others, about being humble, about not sticking out. If someone praises you and you say, I pull back, it's
whatever you like. There's bread, there's ham, there's cheese, there's tomato.
And there was just a very powerful experience in coming together, and the children could see that the black fella's way and the white fella's way had some overlaps, and we might have different words and different concepts to point at certain things, but those things are different. Those things are driving at similar purposes of responsibility and contribution. I came back to that school a few months later, and the deputy principal reported that there was still a different feeling in the school. Children were wearing shoes. Children felt at home. They felt connected. It's a great privilege. Sorry, just a second. I'm in the middle of a speech. No, stop. I'm in the middle of a speech. Sorry, working from home. It's been a privilege to do this work. Working with students has helped these young people embrace difference and be ready to take their place to bring humanity together. We now live in a very interesting time. I like to think of it as a almost post-geography age, where people from different places can talk to each other and listen to each other, interact. Calisha was sitting in her house in one part of Sydney, and she talked to a group of students in the other part of Sydney. This was during the last lockdown, and she talked about her experience, a very moving account, her diary, about her Hajj diary and what that was like for her. And the children, the students, these were studies of religion, older students were asking questions, and there was interaction, there was discussion. And before COVID, the only way that such an event could happen is for Calisha to get in her car and drive across Sydney, which is taking up a lot of time. And that's all within Sydney. But now if we think about Dubbo or Bullsbrook or Catherine or wherever it is all around this country, geography has kept people apart. And I live in St. Ives, and we have certain populations represented here. You go to Blacktown, you have other populations. You go to regional Australia, and again, other groups are found in various places. But with the Zoom video conferencing technology, there's a great opportunity for greater interaction and getting people to talk across differences of geography as well as culture. So I'm hoping that we can think of some ways of ensuring that more young Australians and older Australians can have these opportunities that those students had listening to Calisha or Aamon and people from various backgrounds. Part of the way of doing that is also to record people's stories and encourage people to share those recordings so that we can hear other people's stories and empathize with their experiences. So this plan is evolving, and I look forward to discussion with the group here of how people feel about how the power of encountering the other, hearing each other's stories, can engage young people into bringing humanity together. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Kastel. What an inspiring talk, and you know, it was fascinating to hear that story that you shared about the bat, and I think the bat has echoed it in our sentiments in our own respective ways. So thank you for those sobering thoughts. And now we have the panel discussion. I just want to invite Calisha, Bennett, and Tanja Hagedorn, and welcome Calisha and welcome Tanja. Now at the very beginning, I would like you to please say a few words about yourself and your work within the Together with Humanity Foundation, and we'll take it from there. Over to you, Calisha. Welcome.
Sorry, and of course, Aamon as well is welcome to join.
Yes, Aamon. Yes, Aamon. Aamon, you're very welcome to join as well, please.
What I was going to get out of that one.
No,
Aamon was like, yes. Good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to be here, and thank you to our lovely hosts and guests of honor and special attendees. And thank you, Zalman, for what you've shared. I always get goosebumps, no matter how many times I hear the pencil story, especially. There's just something beautiful and sacred in its wisdom from that story. So I'm an informal education officer with Together for Humanity. People are like, what does that mean? Does it mean you're not formal, or it means I get to be a little bit creative with what I put together for students because I'm not a teacher like some of our other educators, a qualified teacher. I do have a lot of experience with young people, and I have a TAFE certificate in youth work and a degree in education as an education assistant. So I get to design programs with the intention of helping to benefit young people in schools all over New South Wales and Australia, and to help increase their intercultural understanding and improve their sense of identity and help develop within them a sense of true belonging and a true sense of purpose when it comes to an inspiration, when it comes to them looking at their lives and how they might be able to contribute to the wider society. And we know and understand that that can only happen if they have this strong sense of identity and a strong feeling of belonging to society. So in particular, we had last year, towards the end of last year, we had the Metro and Regional Youth Summit. So that was the first time I was part of organising that with our amazing team. And so we had metro and regional schools come together, and we had to do it digitally thanks to COVID, and we had to navigate that in a very interesting way, and we managed to have the students present to members of the New South Wales Parliament digitally, whether they made videos or had speeches or presentations. They put forward ideas and projects as to how we could increase and improve the sense of inclusivity within their schools and or their wider community. So the students pulled that off amazingly, and what we saw come from the student-led initiative was that they were some of them were able to have follow-ups with some of those members of Parliament and put forward some of their ideas to create lasting change potentially. And it's really important that we support that student voice, the voice of young people, and sometimes we have to facilitate that adults listen to what they have to say and listen to some of the really genius ideas that they put forward. Something else that I've been heavily involved in is the design and the execution of a project called the BBB program. It stands for Believe, Belong and Blossom. In particular, it's for high school girls, although we have done it with upper primary. And what that aims to do is to place the girls in a super safe environment around mentors who they can connect with and relate to, and share who they are and hear who these mentors are, hear about their life experiences, tap into what these girls think about their identities, whether it's their nationality, their culture, their faith, their school or family identity, and then really look at what challenges they see that they might face moving into the future as young people, and then facilitate them to come up with potential either solutions to those challenges that might come up for them based on some of their, it might be due to, religious differences or, sexual identity issues or cultural, quirks and perks that they have that have impacted how they feel about themselves, or what we have seen now at large globally, the impacts of the deterioration of mental health in young people due to the COVID lockdown. So letting the young people put forward what they're feeling and what they're thinking, and then facilitating for them to come up with potential solutions. And that is done through the facilitation and the modeling, the role modeling of the mentors who participate in this program alongside with me. So we've managed to roll out that program in schools in Melbourne, as well as New South Wales, where I am, Adelaide and Perth as well. We've had a recent pilot in Perth. So it's been beautiful to watch and see, and I think the biggest thing has been hearing the feedback from girls and having a note passed to us at the end of a program saying thank you, from two girls, from Asian background who aren't from the same faith as me, but saying thank you so much. We've never been able to speak like this before. And they go to a girls' public school in the inner suburbs in Sydney. Or when we had girls from refugee backgrounds, migrant backgrounds, say in their feedback that, at the start of this program, I thought I only had a few options for my future and for my career options, but now I realize I can do so much more. And some of them even saying, now I realize I can do anything I put my mind to. And that's just in a matter of doing 8 1-hour sessions with the girls. So it's allowed us to realize how important it is to have that time with young people. So I'll pass it on now so that I don't take up all the time. Pass it over to Tanja and Aamon.
Thank you, Calisha. Tanja, over to you.
Thank you. I could continue listening to you, Calisha. Thank you for having me. I guess a little bit of my background. I come from my life journey has woven in and out of different things. I started out as an occupational therapist and was practicing that for about 10 years, mostly the large majority of the time with children, working with children with varying degrees of disability, mostly in South Africa. And then as we moved here to Australia with my family, I was more involved in my local church, and again found myself working with youth, and I designed a program together with our pastor for young people, grade 6, sort of transitioning between primary school and high school, that just let them explore sort of who they were and their identity in their faith, and that ownership. And I realized in doing that and working with church communities, how much I value a process of transformation and change and ownership, and that's sort of taking me on the path then of peace building, because of just from a background as a South African, I've just observed some of sort of post-conflict and post anything difficult transition periods and how they can be done well or not so well, and just have this real belief in transformation, personal transformation, but also community transformation. So when I came across Together for Humanity, I think one of the highlights for me initially was just to be able to fully be myself. So I brought who I was and who I am. I am a Christian. It's one of those interviews where you don't have to not mention your faith, but you mention your faith and you mention your passions and you mention, sort of the things that you feel strongly about. And I think, there's real power in that. And I think that is what I try to get from the students as well is to go, bring your whole self to the conversation, because only through that we'll create better understanding of each other. If we each own our space and then allow someone else to own their space as well. So finding myself in Queensland and having the opportunity to dream up what we'll do here. I was thanking COVID lockdown a little bit last year because it gave me time to strategize and think and network here. And, ended up with, because of wanting to have a whole school approach, sort of a bit of a package that we will provide to schools. And one is an offering of teacher professional development in conjunction with whatever they see as a need in the students. So again, from a student-led approach, finding out from the students first what they perceive as issues in the schools, whether that be issues of racism or any other conflict that they can observe, homophobia. There's a lot of discrimination due to gender misunderstanding these days, I'm finding. So just, giving the students a voice to identify what the real need is, and then going from there. One of the programs that we run is called CHAT. So it stands for Cultural Hearing, Asking, Telling. This was developed by Scripture Union. Scripture Union with Scripture Union in Queensland has now merged as Scripture Union Australia, which it's a Christian organization, but here they partner with chaplains in schools. And the chaplains, although they are all Christians, but it's not about a faith chaplaincy, but it is more just well-being of children. And the beauty of partnering with them is that we have sustainability of our programs and our input. So after we run programs, they will continue with these programs, or they end up in social action programs. Like one of the schools we worked in, after 8 weeks, the students together with the chaplain and the youth worker created a student voice space that is now ongoing and independent of our input. And so we can enrich a school community, but then we can empower them to continue. So just create that independence from us a little bit as well. And then, like Zalman mentioned, we were just in one of the schools where we also run the chat programs. And we did 6 days back to back with all the grade 7, 8s and 9s in that school. So that was about more than 1,000 kids that we saw in groups of 60. And literally just created a space for good questions around difficult topics. So by introducing ourselves, we came in as a diverse team, and sharing some of our personal information. It gave the kids permission to ask, the questions around gender, questions around religion, the combination of gender and religion, worldview, so many different topics that came up, and we just encouraged them to continue doing that. And feedback was mostly from teachers that stood in the background and came up to us afterwards and saying that we just don't do that enough. We teach, so this is educational for them, but we often come with knowledge, but this models actually that the knowledge is already in the room, the questions are in the room, and we just encourage them to bring that forward. So yeah, that's just a little snippet. And
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tanja. And Aamon, last but not the least, a few words from you. Welcome, Aamon.
Thank you very much. My internet is a little bit choppy, so if it does cut out, apologies. A bit about my background. I started in the community sector in 2012. I always knew growing up that I wanted to help people. I just didn't know what that looked like. I got into outreach work, then youth work, and over the last almost 10 years now, I've worked in drug and alcohol addiction, homelessness, domestic violence, both male and female, child protection, and the list goes on and on. I actually joined Together for Humanity originally as a contractor because I had a passion I felt like that young men didn't have the space to have conversations around being a young man in this current world, especially when gender politics take such a precedent in conversations. And I was finding that young men that didn't have an understanding of themselves were not having an understanding of the world around them, and not being able to have a conversation or have a mentor or someone that they could look up to or someone that they could just talk to about these issues that they're facing. They were not then able to have proper relationships or with their schools, with their colleagues, with their people at home, with their families, whatever the case was. So the idea was to create a program that allowed young men to explore what being a young man in the current world looked like to them. And by doing that, giving them a sense of ownership of themselves and their own identity, to then be able to go out into the world and be confident in who they are, and to kind of explore those values and those ethics. And yeah, I did that for the first maybe 6 or 7 months. I only joined Together for Humanity in, I think it was late February, early March this year. So it hasn't been that long, but we've done a lot of amazing work. And yeah, I've recently moved to Victoria, still with Together for Humanity, to explore, current partnerships to explore new partnerships and to rekindle old partnerships, and to find ways to creatively engage in the meaningful work that we're doing, and that is much needed. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Fantastic, Aamon. And Rabbi Kastel, I mean, now we enter to the most critical moment of our panel discussion, which is about questions. And while I'm going to ask the question, I just want to reflect on a clarion call from you on the, taking the side of the bat, which you advocated for. And we have identified our bats today. Calisha told a very poignant story from her experiences, and Tanja's stories from South Africa to traveling to Australia, and then Aamon's cry of young man. I think all of these variances of bats are poignant in an Australian society that's different, that's growing, and it's multicultural. But the question that keeps coming to our hearts and minds are, how do we bring these people and communities where they feel a sense of belonging? And what's your recipe, Rabbi Kastel, for developing a sense of belonging in the communities that tend to be developing at the same time fragmented at times like this?
I think that young people are able to figure these things out if they're given opportunities to talk about it openly. And I think that's what my colleagues have been talking about is I mean, the classroom teachers, of course, do these things all the time, but I guess we need to do more of it, and perhaps sometimes it's a bit easier with a guest. Classroom teachers have to move children through a series of tasks and achievements and deliverables, and sometimes a fresh person coming into a school, playing some games and telling some stories and gives students an opportunity to kind of to clarify or look inside themselves. I remember one boy happened to be from a Lebanese Muslim background, and he said, when we say that the whole world hates us and they're all racist, we're doing the same thing as those people who stereotype us and say we're all terrorists. And it wasn't something that he was instructed in. It was just something that this particular boy, in opening the conversation. So I think having open-ended, respectful conversations with young people gives them opportunities to explore and find answers that make sense to them.
Thank you, Rabbi Kastel. And Calisha and Tanja, if I can bring both of you on an interesting and a different note. Now, you shared some experiences of your involvement in Together with Humanity Foundation. Now, can you give us some example where the initiatives that you have taken made a tangible difference to our local community, which was youth-led, where you and your members from the foundation and others was involved, and that led to a sustainable change at local level. Calisha, if I can start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Sonu. I think I kind of referred to them in my earlier mentioning about the youth summit and the ideas that the young people proposed and wanted to execute within their school and community, and then putting that forward to community leaders and members of parliament to actually, provoke or prompt some kind of support and backing from our leaders that high up. So even our young people feeling, all the way from regional especially, feeling like they had access and they had reach to leaders all the way in the big cities. I think that was really important, that we were able to facilitate that type of connection and that type of interaction. And I think when it comes to helping to promote that sense of belonging, it is about adults playing their part now as much as we can in facilitating the connections that need to take place and modeling the behavior in front of young people, to show them that the world out there isn't about us and them, and it isn't about feeling like someone is out to get you, and that young people need to be on the defense or the off, or be offended both ways. So, when I think about including that sense of belonging in the next generation, it's about us reaching into our young people's communities and being relatable and being supportive and being good role models and helping to create those links and reducing the fear, the fear or the anxiety of the other, and realizing that, if we all let our guards down, we're all pretty nice people. And that's the place where we can get along. But, with young people these days, and perhaps some of the attitudes that they've seen or that have been modeled or that have been promoted by, perhaps mainstream media and Hollywood, there's this kind of an inclination to be guard up. I can't be who I am, and I can't show who I really am because that's too dangerous, and I'll be left vulnerable. So I need to put up this mask and this front of either being really tough or being with this group of people, or being mean to someone else when I don't really want to be, and different types of behaviors. So it's about changing the social culture for the better as well, when I think about creating lasting impact and change, and it's working together with young people.
Thank you, Calisha. Tanja, over to you. If you can tease that question a little bit deeper in terms of, we all have vulnerabilities, but embracing those vulnerabilities in a world that is dynamic and changing. What are your thoughts on this particular aspect? And you could share some experiences from yours in South Africa or here in Australia. Tanja, over to you.
I think the vulnerabilities, I think what Calisha said before is one of the main things that creates sort of a space for a youth-led approach, is when we model that vulnerability. So, going in not with all the answers, but going in with really good questions, and therefore, just allowing young people to say, oh, I also have questions, but I also have thoughts and ideas, and I find that there's a certain jadedness in young people where they already think, once I give them some space and give them a voice, that the next thing I'll do is I'll teach into that. I will have an opinion. I will defend the adult world, or I will correct them in their youthfulness. And when we stay though, when we sort of stay in that space of still hearing and still creating that space until they ask of us, yeah, but why? I'm reminded of a situation where we were in a circle of young people. They were sort of grade 9s and 10s, and they were all just in a really heated conversation, lamenting, this imbalance between adult voice and student voice. and how they could identify, long lists of things that were, where they're being wronged. And they were saying, well, and if they complain to the system, then it takes ages, in that big machine of the adult world, for something to change, and it's just like, well, teachers are teachers and they can just get on with it. But if they do one quick thing, like dashing out the front door to grab something that they dropped, then they already have, there's already a consequence and there's already something. And we listened and we acknowledged all of that. But we also modeled that we're curious about everything and everybody. And so it turned into where they were curious about, so what is it about the school system that slows the system down? So they then asked us, why does it take long for things to change? And then gave us permission to explain something, which was amazing, because if we had just said that, if we just said, yes, but you have to understand, teachers have to do their jobs and administration has a certain procedure and all of that, they would have just felt shut down straight away and would have felt pushed back into that space of token voice. And so I think for me, it is really important to stay the distance. So an example that I saw where, again, the young people were surprised is when they alerted us of racism and homophobia in the school. And we collected sort of the loudest one or the most vocal in the school. And we gave them a space for voice over a whole term. So every second week we spoke to them and we kept hearing them and we kept asking them. And they were surprised that after the school holidays, we came back and we kept hearing them and asking them. And I put my finger on it and I said, you didn't think we were going to come back, did you? You thought that the school would have said, see, we've done it now, and isn't that amazing? And they acknowledged that. And so then the school kept taking it further and kept saying, what do you want us to do? And then they identified the young high schoolers, the juniors need this, more education, and the senior high schoolers need more voice. And the school kept hearing it and kept implementing it. And, you can just see slowly some trust developing from that. And I think it's so delicate. And I think that to me is key, is just to stick with it a little bit.
Thank you, Tanja. You call for allowing the young people to ask questions and then helping them co-design solutions. And that's, I think, that really beautifully said. Thanks, Tanja. And Aamon, over to you. And before I invite you to say a few words, you in your last few minutes, you talked about ethics. And these days, as you see in the university curriculum and so on and so forth, we tend to have a more a binary solution sometimes for all difficult problems. And the good old humanities and philosophies, where the questions were more open-ended, are sometimes looked down after. So how do we engage youth to bring more of humanities discussions around morality, ethics, and humanity in general? Aamon, over to you.
The benefit of working with such amazing people is they've answered all the questions. Look, just to piggyback off what's been said already, I think too many of the times we speak at the young people and we don't allow them to speak for themselves. And they, like it's been said already, they have the answers. We just have to ask the right questions in the right context, in a safe space. If they truly feel safe, if they truly feel like they can not be judged or can express what their thoughts are, they have a lot to say. You don't have to tell them to speak up in the playground when we're with their friends or on a Friday night at a sleepover. They have more than enough to say. So if you give them the space, if you give them the opportunity, if you earn their trust, they're going to tell you exactly what they're thinking. They're going to tell you what the solutions are, what they would like to see the solutions are. Yeah, some of them may be doable, some of them maybe not, but at least like giving them the ability to be heard. How many of us in our lives have felt like, oh, we weren't able to speak up about something and really like hated that later on? Like, and we hold on to that resentment, we hold on to that anger, and it's like 10 years later, we can still be looking back, man, that person, that didn't allow me to, like, it can be really, really damaging. And you know, as it's been said before as well, like sometimes teachers are overworked and understaffed and they don't have time to explore the way we explore. And that's the benefit of working for an organization like Together for Humanity. It allows us to go into a school setting and to explore some of these things in a way that's safe, in a way that's relevant, and, you know, give them the space to be able to give it back to us, give answers to us. And I think it's, you know, it's a big commendation for the bravery of the work, like my colleagues, to be able to be brave enough to have those conversations. And sometimes to say, I don't have an answer, you know, like that's also a valid answer, to be vulnerable enough to say that to them, you know, that this is a tough situation. And yeah, that's a difficult task, you know. And that's what really earns their respect, when you're real with them. When you go in there and you just tell them a whole bunch of stuff, like, then you're just like any other person that's standing in front of the classroom. But to really have a conversation, to really give them permission, especially in a time where speech is now being monitored and being scrutinized, and like people feel like they can't have honest conversations because something's going to happen. They're going to get bullied. They're going to get picked on. They're going to get suspended. They're going to get expelled. They're going to get outcast from their circles. So it's really about like allowing them to speak to us in a way that's authentic, and to create that authentic space. That's our job as facilitators.
Thank you, Aamon, for reminding us the need for safe spaces, authentic spaces, the places where you can belong. And I think it really brings us to a full circle in this debate when Rabbi Kastel's call for bats and looking after the bats, and then you bringing us to this part of the conversation. Brilliantly done. Thank you, Aamon. Now, I've just opened this debate for discussions from the floor. Deborah, you have a question. Please, Deborah, you unmute yourself and feel free to ask the question.
Thank you, Sonu. Calisha, your BBB program sounds wonderful. I was involved for just a term with the goals program that sounded a little bit similar. As I mentioned previously, I've moved from schools like Bass High to Ravenswood, and they're very privileged students, but they're impoverished. And they're impoverished in that they think that Sydney is the Sydney that they live in. So my question as a teacher who does try very hard as a rogue teacher to raise awareness, how can we make meaningful change in the minds of these very young, privileged people so that they understand what Sydney really looks like and the individuals and the cultures involved, and so that all young people can work together? I know that you're empowering, in particular, some young people, but I'd love to know that when they're out in the world and facing these these kids with blindfolds, but a lot of money and quite a bit of power, I'd like to think that there's something we could do to raise those kids' awareness as well.
Thank you, Deborah. Yeah, we work in schools beyond the BBB program. And, you know, we also do studies of religion programs in schools. And sometimes I come along as a guest presenter when we do like an interfaith panel, or if there's another program or an inter-school program. One of the biggest things that TFH does is we do inter-schools where we bring kids from different schools, different backgrounds, different socioeconomic levels, different cultures, and we mush them all together, and we do activities and facilitate the conversations and the games and the connection, so that by the end, you know, of a half-day program or a full-day program, they're like, these kids are just like us, and there are some differences though, and here are the different, you know, things that are different about us, and that's okay. But a big thing is exposure to difference is really important, even if it doesn't mean having a whole school visit another school. these days you can do that on Zoom anyway. You could do, you know, online incursions, excursions into school programs, but also just through having a variety of presenters. With the BBB program, I come in as a Muslim presenter, as the lead presenter, but I have alongside with me, you know, maybe an Indian Muslim who doesn't wear a scarf and doesn't practice the faith, but still adheres to the Islamic faith, and a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Christian woman next to me, and then a lovely Jewish Russian lady who comes along, and we talk about a lot of different things, but have this similar grounding that the kids see and feel, you know, in terms of our dynamic with each other, our rapport with each other. And we try to draw that out, you know, and some of the differences and the impacts that we've seen from even in a grade 6 school at the start of the year, where the girls were very clearly grouping themselves, sitting with the same, this chitter chatter, these funny looks here and there, a couple of girls totally on their own because they had very poor English, or they weren't so, you could say, you know, bright. They didn't catch on as quickly, but we had a mentor sit in with her and coax her into the larger group. And by the end of, you know, 7-8 weeks of the program, the girls had decided, we're all one, we're all the same. We all need to hang out together. And that's an attitude change that we hope they'll continue on into high school potentially for these year 6 girls. Then that starts to change the face of the social culture that goes on, you know, within schools. And that's what we need to promote, our young people, especially those who have leadership potential, to be those stronger voices in saying, no, we're not going to do things that way, because that outcasts someone else and that's mean, and we're going to speak out about it, and we're all going to hang out together and no one should be left out. So it's about, you know, trying to promote that type of change and really put that courage in young people. And that can only come from them feeling really solid within themselves, which is why we do so much work on identity and values and what they think about themselves and what they think about others. And again, dropping down all those fears, turning down the fear gauge. All of a sudden they're like, there isn't much to be scared of. I can be brave. And I can stand for something good, especially if that means including someone else or defending and protecting someone if they're being treated unfairly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, if I can just quickly add something very short. Deborah, practically speaking, Calisha does have a few free days in March. So if you'd like, and at no charge to the school, although they're welcome to make a donation, but Calisha can come and maybe just as a proof of concept, work with one group of girls for a day. Maybe they can be, you know, chosen for whatever reason. So that would be one option that could work for Ravenswood. The other option is on the 8th of March, there will be 3 schools, and I think we can handle a 4th one, coming together. So Auburn Girls, Granville Boys, Emmanuel School from Randwick. And it'd be great to have a girls' school, because it's a bit unbalanced at the moment. We've got 2 schools, single-sex schools from the west, and then we've got a mixed gender school from the east. It'd be nice to have a girls' school from the north to balance it out. So that's something to look at as well. The other quick comment, Sarah, in terms of your comment about regions, one of the things that we're looking to develop is these Zoom kind of sessions, so that people in the regions can pop on clicked on the link, and suddenly Calisha's in their classroom from the comfort of her own home, and various other people. So we want to get people from various different backgrounds, and Hindu and also cultural groups. You know, we're looking to get a bigger mix of people from different cultural backgrounds, so that people who are, you know, if it's too far for them to travel, to have more contact through Zoom. But I think the other point, as you made, the point there could be resistance in regional areas, is through the relationships and through the Rotary Club kind of network, to actually talk to people who know other people, because if someone they trust tells them here's an opportunity to consider, they'll think about it more openly.
Thank you, Rabbi Kastel. I'm just reminded of time, and I've got 2 more questions. The chat function has really exploded, so I would try to bridge them together. The question for President-elect David Hurst, who asked, what kind of solutions do the students come up with when they are listened to and given the opportunity to speak and be heard? And Rabbi Kastel, if you can answer this question along with Aamon, I want both of you to share your thoughts on this. And a last question from Sarah Lynn, which is about where do the education bodies fail in encouraging interfaith cross-cultural dialogue. And Tanja, if you can take that question, that would be appreciated. Rabbi Kastel, over to you.
Look, my short answer, David, is I think that schools are busy places, and we haven't really explored that question as deeply and as extensively as I think we can. Come back to us in a year. We'll have a much more interesting answer.
Thank you. Aamon, you want to add something over there? Sure.
Yeah, just it's again, just reiterating, it's about that space. When young people feel like they're safe to open up, then they're going to bring some of their problematic thinking to the forefront to be able to explore it. And if they don't feel safe, then they're going to pretend like it doesn't exist. And we all know that that's not really plausible. It's not going to get anywhere. No one's going to benefit from that. So again, it's about having those honest conversations with them and going, it's okay. Like, we all have problematic thinking, but like, let's talk about this. Where does this come from? And understanding that, you know, and allowing, especially working with young men, that's very difficult to do, to talk about vulnerability, you know, oh, that's a girl's thing. That's not what we do. So giving them that, you know, leading by example as well, like as a young man myself, like going, it's okay to be vulnerable. Look, I'm comfortable in my masculinity and I can still be a vulnerable person and talk about my shortcomings, you know, leading by example and giving them that space.
Thank you, Aamon. And Tanja, I've just got one more question for you from Sarah Lynn, which is about that, where do we fail in terms of what can we do?
Yes, thank you for that. I may just quickly go back to David's question, because we have had the opportunity to ask and give students that you know, that space to express. And a lot of the initial desire that they're expressing is that if they need to listen well, they also want people in authority to listen. And so there, a lot of the solution comes from that they're suggesting better collaboration. So instead of having top-down approaches to their situation, they want to just be involved in that conversation. And they wanting to have the same respect returned to them. So there's always this expectation that, you know, students speak in a certain respectful manner, but they don't feel like that's reciprocated. And they want to be able to say that. And they want to be able to say, can you please listen? So that's probably the main desire that I hear. And in answering to Sarah's question, I think from what I can see, I'm not the expert on this definitely, but I think the Australian education system and the curriculum actually creates a lot of space there. So, you know, in the curriculum, there's a big aspect of the well-being space that you know, requires actually teachers and schools to address interfaith and intercultural issues and conversations. I think where it's lacking is the converting that into the classroom. You know, teachers are notoriously poor, time poor. They have, you know, their whole academic list to come get through. There are behavior management strategies. There are so many things, extra meetings, and I think a lot of times it's just put on the back burner due to lack of time. And that's why in our teacher PDs, that's what we really heavily want to focus on, is to give them that link so that even the maths teacher and the science teacher can find a way to speak through culture and speak through religion and other aspects of identity, just incorporating that in their learning and not always feeling like it's an added extra, but just part of their language. And so that's an opportunity for us to link that. And I think it's just a matter of, say in university, I was saying about universities, the link even in the teacher students is not being made. So they're presented with the curriculum, but they're not really actually guided as to how to incorporate that well.
Thank you, Tanja. And in the interest of time, I would proceed to the next part of our meeting. And can I have invite past District Governor Heinz Gerstel to say a few words to thank our guest speakers. Heinz, over to you. Heinz, can you unmute yourself? Yes, we can hear you.
Better?
Yes.
Thanks, Sonu. It's indeed my pleasure on behalf of our relatively small but esteemed group to move a hearty vote of thanks to Rabbi Zalman Kastel. I think it's also fitting as we come to the end of this secular year 2021, and this is the last event of our Rotary Club of Sydney's Youth Series talks for this year. Although I'd heard of the wonderful work of Rabbi Kastel and his organisation, I actually had the pleasure of only meeting him at a Rotary Club of Sydney luncheon in May this year, and I certainly know that he's no stranger to this club. Today, he's shown us again why he is at the forefront with his work in international dialogue, always looking, seeking, and of course, finding peaceful solutions in this world's religious tensions. This enables us to all share the bounties of peace. And he's certainly has given us some wonderful life lessons and stories and food for thought. Please join me in a round of applause in thanking Rabbi Kastel and his team. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Governor Heinz Kastel. And on that note, I want to thank Rabbi Kastel, Calisha, Tanja, and all the members of the Together with Humanity Foundation, Aamon, Syed included, for joining us today and illuminating this discussion with some fascinating thoughts and ideas. A big thanks to all the guests and Rotarians who joined us on the evening. And before we close, I have some concluding thoughts for all of us to reflect. Youth have been at the forefront of social movements, from civil rights movement in the United States to the Vietnam War protests. Youth have been the catalyst for change. During the civil rights movement, youth marched down the American streets for civil rights legislation and voter rights for one and all, to challenge racism, to call out dictators, and create a movement to put an end to the war. Youth of today inspires hope for tomorrow. However, the hope and enthusiasm also need temper and guidance. To acknowledge the challenges youth faces today, challenges surrounding mental health, isolation, malnutrition, climate change, housing, etc., etc. Youth of today live in duality of abundance, of scarcity, duality of overconnectedness and isolation at the same time. How do we address this duality? How do we shape the future of youth for a sustainable world? We don't have the answers to several questions we are raising here today. However, it's a good start. It's a good start that Rotary Youth Talks, we are coming all together to ask those difficult questions. On that note, I want to leave you with these words of wisdom from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. As you know, Rabbi Sachs departed this earth earlier this year. Rabbi Sachs said about youth, just know that some little seeds of greatness exist in all of you. And it does not necessarily have to be the greatness in the eyes of the world. Sometimes one single act of kindness can redeem a life. Sometimes a single smile can rescue a person from loneliness and despair. You never know what the consequences of your next act can be, but people never forget a good or kind or encouraging word or a deed. That greatness is there for each one of us. All we have to do is to encourage and give the courage to respond and let it express itself in a way that we can do. And that's true for every single one of us. Must I remind all of you that Rotary Youth Talks is a free to attend sessions, and I would like to invite all Rotarians and your friends to join us next time in January. May the new year bring you happiness, peace, and prosperity, and wishing you a joyous 2022. On that note, I declare the meeting closed and the floor is open for fellowship and discussion. Thank you, everyone.